Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the A's? And we are about midway through the 2024 to 25 offseason. Made a few trades. We picked up several players in the Rule 5 draft, and we've also made a couple of minor free agent acquisitions. Since our last episode, although we haven't moved forward any days, we have made an additional trade. As I tend to do when I finish the last episode, I couldn't pull myself away from the excitement of this A's team and this series that I thank you all for joining us on. And I did some player searches, and I was looking for a pitcher with well above average stuff who also had plus movement and plus control. And clearly there were many pitchers who met those criteria out there. One who intrigued me, who was on the free agent market, was Craig Kimbrell, who you can see supposedly is looking for $10.6 million. And I guess he is now. I thought his demand was lower. But anyways, Kimbrell, well above average stuff, plus movement and average control. But certainly would be an asset to our team, but not going to go spending $10.6 million on a 36-year-old. But as it happened, the same search showed a few older relievers who were on squads already that I investigated. And we ended up making a trade for Jason Adam. And the interesting thing about this trade is that you'll see here, if you look closely, that I've now made a free agent offer to Michael Conforto, which those of you who watched my Yankees and Mariners miniseries in OOTP 25 won't be surprised by, since it seemed like he was somehow always ending up on our team, or we were trading away at a trade deadline, or trading for him at a trade deadline. Letting him go if he wanted a ton of money in free agency, then picking him up a year later when he wasn't looking for much money in free agency. And we've made an offer to Michael Conforto. Now it's 3 years, but only this next year is guaranteed. If he accepts it, then there would be team options for the second and third seasons. So we still wouldn't be making a significant long-term commitment to the soon-to-be 32-year-old. But the reason we've made an offer to Conforto is that to get Jason Adam, we had to send Seth Brown, who we only recently finally re-signed, to the Marlins to pick him up. And when I looked at Seth Brown, he is a little bit older than Conforto. Not as good in contact, not as good in the eye. But he's got more home run power. They're both left-handed outfielders. Brown is making less than we would be playing for Conforto, but we were able to pick up Jason Adam and get the Marlins to retain 3/4 of his salary for us. So we're only going to be spending about $900,000 on him next year. So I figured if the options were to have Seth Brown and then go ahead and sign Kimbrell, or to trade away Seth Brown for Jason Adam, who's going to cost us almost $10 million a year less than Kimbrell, and then spend a couple extra dollars on Conforto, I felt that made sense. As I noted, Conforto's contact is a little better. His eye is a little better. His power not as good as Seth Brown. He is a slightly better defensive outfielder than Seth Brown. He's younger than Seth Brown, as I mentioned. And I did kind of feel that in a park like Oakland that doesn't necessarily give up the most home runs, Brown's extra power might be a little bit wasted in Oakland, whereas Conforto's better eye and ability to draw walks and his better contact might play a little better. Certainly when we look at the batting stats over the course of their careers, against right-handed pitching, Conforto has a fine 121 WRC plus over the course of his career, while Brown is Not quite as good. I can't remember what the actual number is, but since I'm talking about it at this point, I'll show it to you to show you that I'm not just making total garbage up. And he's a 111 for his career against right-handed pitching. So in terms of the WRC plus for their careers, Conforto's almost 10% better than Brown against right-handed pitching. So I felt like that trade made sense. Adam, not going to be with us for the long term. This is probably the only year he'll be with us. Conforto, conceivably, this might be the only year that he's going to be with us. But did feel that overall that made us better without having any significant long-term commitments, because I know some of you have commented that you're surprised kind of how many guys in their 30s that we're signing. And my thought process is, as long as I don't make any real long-term commitments to those players, if they're the best players who happen to be available to us, given our budgetary considerations, I'd rather have them on the team than a lesser player. But clearly, if there's some 23, 24, 25-year-olds or some prospects who are still down in the minors that we can bring into this organization for a reasonable price, I would certainly love to do that. And this is kind of following up on a comment from the last episode from both Bald Sherlock and Jeansy about potentially looking for a multiplayer offer for Mason Miller, who's a guy that, as we saw in the last episode, has some pretty interesting players that we could get in return for him. Now, a lot of the players that we could get in return for him are older players, not necessarily critical for us to have for the medium to long term, because bringing on a really great 32-year-old when we're probably going to be a pretty mediocre team the next 3 years doesn't make a lot of sense. But we'll explore a prospect package for Mason Miller, and then also might look at some multiplayer packages just to see what's out there. We'll have to look at some of these. Obviously, the star rankings are not the be-all and end-all, and I think we all know that. But certainly that second package on the list looked like we'd at least be getting some volume. Can get the youngster Sebastian Walcott, third baseman. Like his power, not a bad glove. He's interesting, only 18 years old. Don't know if we really need two young third basemen. Glader Figueroa, certainly a bit less interesting as a prospect than Walcott. You can get our old buddy Brian Wu, along with Colt Emerson from Seattle. I'm just reviewing these quickly here. I won't make you bear with me looking through all of these, but I'm just going to pick out a couple that look a little more potentially interesting. Jorge Ruiz, a 20-year-old left fielder. Meh. But with him, we could also get Paulino Santana, 18-year-old center fielder. I don't hate him. He's got decent speed, decent range as a center fielder, potentially plus contact and plus power. Hit .218 in rookie ball this past year as a 17-year-old. So he's certainly not entirely uninteresting. Yandel Ricardo, decent third baseman with some pop in the bat, and Fernando Cruz, decent second baseman prospect. Doesn't look like we're getting any blue chip prospects for Miller, but there's certainly some options out there. And then I did want to come back to this one. I saw this 3-for-1 offer up top. A little bit older prospects that we're getting offered here, but they're still younger than Miller. Agustin Ramirez, Certainly looks like he could be a solid backup catcher. Personally, I'd like a little better defense from my backup catcher, but he's probably got a better bat than some of the backup catchers I've had over the years. Alex Iadacernia, right fielder, some positive personality traits, pretty good speed, decent corner outfielder, not a ton of pop in the bat. He's a little older, already 24. And then Mason Wynn. It's not uninteresting. Pretty solid defensive player. I mean, he's got the profile of a Gold Glove third baseman, but he could certainly play second or short at a pretty high level as well. Has some decent speed, decent contact, potentially average power. I honestly don't hate this offer. I like the high work ethic. I don't love the low leadership that he has, but this isn't a horrible offer. I don't think I'm going to do anything right now because I do want to see what Miller looks like coming out of our development lab, although things haven't been going particularly good there with only Mitch Spence on track with about 2 months to go. But I don't think that Mason Miller's value is going to just magically crater over the next 3, 6, 9, even 12 months. So I think we will have an opportunity to continue shopping him and continue looking at some offers from teams and maybe at some point even look for a more highly regarded prospect in a trade, even if maybe we need to add a little bit more with him to get it done. So appreciate those ideas from Bald, Sherlock, and Jeansy. Katie St. Clair has also noted that should probably just keep Mason Miller around, and I don't necessarily disagree with that for the near to medium term. But if any of you have thoughts on that last offer we saw from the Cardinals, would love to hear it in the comments down below, because even by the time we get to our next episode, we're likely to be able to get a somewhat similar package to that if we really wanted to. And with that long and meandering introduction to the episode out of the way, we're finally ready to start moving forward in time. We're only about 2.5, 3 weeks away from the international free agent signing period, so we'll see if we can get, in the meantime, Mr. Conforto signed, as well as Mr. Bowers, who we're still waiting to officially hear back from on the offer that he allegedly favors. And we're going to keep an offer, particularly on some of the hitters that are out on the market. I mentioned at the end of the previous episode that Anthony Santander is a bit intriguing to me to potentially put into our lineup. Think his bat would certainly be the best bat in our lineup if we brought him on board. Don't really want to make a real long-term commitment to him and don't want to pay a ton of money. When we checked in at the end of the last episode, he was looking at 5 years at almost $15 million a year. So that's not going to work for us. But if some of these guys continue to linger on the market, perhaps over the next month or two, there will be an opportunity for us to improve our team a little more as we get ready for the 2025 season. And we did get Jake Bowers signed to that minor league deal with major league options. He will be in the mix to potentially be a platoon player in the outfield for us as well, or at first base or DH. Think that his bat against right-handed pitching could certainly be one that would help our team. But again, that's not necessarily saying a lot, given that we were by far the worst offense in the American League last year, and we were literally the worst in the American League in many hitting categories. And a little bit of good news. You may remember Vicente Soto, who was one of the international free agents this year. thought he was intriguing at 22 years old to bring into our system. He was actually 21 when we first looked at him. We offered him a minor league contract, and he said no thank you, but he is re-engaged with us and supposedly is a little more willing to think about a minor league contract at this point. Potential that he could have an interesting bat for a middle infielder. Now, he doesn't have a particularly interesting glove for a middle infielder, which is a problem, but if we can bring him into our system for some depth, certainly won't be the worst move we've made this offseason. And as we get closer to the IAFA period, we've actually put Mason Miller onto the trade block just to generate offers for him. We're pretty regularly getting offers. None of them have been particularly interesting to me, but you never know when someone's going to throw someone out there that's intriguing to me, and maybe we will have a deal come into my inbox that ends up working for us and is a lot less work than me going out and searching for one. And we made it to the start of the preseason. Michael Conforto just announced that he's going to sign with us. He can't wait until the day that we hoist the championship trophy above our heads. I can't either, Michael, but it's conceivable you're only going to be with us for one season. And hey, I hope we win the championship this year, but I'm not counting on it. One interesting piece of news, John Fisher likes the way the offseason has gone, and he just raised our budget to $130 million. So that now puts us in a position where we can get very creative in terms of bringing some players on board. Now, I don't want to make long-term commitments, so that's going to be a limiting factor for us. I still think we are going to put a lot extra money into our draft budget this year and probably boost scouting and player development as well. Hopefully in the IAFA period that's opening up in a couple of days, we'll add some blue chippers into our organization. Juan Soto is gone. I just checked on that for those of you who are wondering. Hitter-wise, there still are, several of the more highly regarded hitters still on the market. Mentioned that I don't hate Santander. The switch-hitting 30-year-old would be another really good bat against right-handed pitching for us. And he's down to only looking for a 4-year deal. If I could get him for a shorter deal with some options, I may actually bring him on board. I know that some of you are screaming at me now, why are you signing 30-year-old players? You're not a real contender this year, and I agree with you to an extent. I tend to think we're probably not contenders, but we did win 77 games magically last year, and we're on the periphery of the wild card race until the last week of the season. Although that team admittedly overperformed a great deal, I feel like we're going to be going into 2025 with a better roster than we had in 2024. So while I don't think we're a real contender, I don't think it's impossible if we make a couple of moves with this windfall that we've just gotten that we could be a contender into the final week of the season for a wild card again, and maybe get a little luckier in the final week of the season this year. So I'm definitely not going to make any huge long-term commitments, especially to older players, but we've got money that we can spend, and if I've got money to spend, I'm going to spend it. It seems like the more than doubling in fan interest that we've had has resulted in, projection that we'll sell a lot more season tickets this year and have much higher attendance this year. So fortunately, the fans in Oakland seem to be changing the tune about our team a little bit. Going from a 50-win team to a 77-win team probably helps with that a bit. So I'm going to at least explore some options in free agency right now. Like I said, not going to make any real long-term commitments to players in their 30s, but it's also a situation with the draft lottery in baseball now, the incentive to go out and win 43 games and guarantee yourself the first pick in the draft just really isn't there. So if I can win more games next season, I just as soon would like to do that. If we finish fourth or third in the AL West instead of fifth in the AL West, it might mean that we have a 5% chance of getting the top pick in the draft instead of a 12 or a 15% chance. And either way, we weren't likely to get it. And I think we're going to try to make an offer to Santander. And because we've got a lot of money to spend right now and not necessarily a lot of players to spend it on, I think we're going to make it a bit front-loaded with team options at lower numbers at the end. We might still be able to structure something that works for him in terms of a big number this year. And it might really work for us if it gives us the option to keep him around at a potentially really good price 2 or 3 years from now if he's still performing well. Looking for 4 years, $13.2 million. We'll see what we come up with. And the first offer we made to Santander, he's at least going to think about. It's definitely front-loaded. He was looking for about $13 million a year average over 4 years. We're giving him just a little over $11 million a year for 4 years, but front-loaded this first year, and then $9 million a year for each of the last 3 seasons, with team options for us in the 3rd and 4th seasons. So it's really likely a 2-year contract, and then if we've improved our budget and he's performing incredibly well, we can keep him around and it might be a decent bargain. Honestly, after this season, it's a 3-year contract at $9 million a year with 2 team options, so I think it's very tradable even at that point. So we're going to go ahead and submit the offer to him, and if we bring him on board along with Conforto, we've at least added a couple of legitimate major league bats. And again, we haven't made any real long-term commitments that could hurt us past 2026. So still feel like we're preserving the financial flexibility that we will need to hopefully eventually sign some players who come up through our system, and then to maybe jump at some opportunities if there's some guys out there in their mid to late 20s who happen to be available in the trade market or free agency over the next couple of years. And as we've tended to see in OOTP 25, as 16-year-olds, the high end of the potential for this class of international amateur free agents is pretty impressive. There's a lot of big-time prospects. Normally, when we get to this point, I kind of preview the players and then finish up an episode and ask for help from our worldwide scouting team on what to do. But because we haven't really done too much in this episode, I'm going to just move forward with the offers and hopefully get a couple of players signed. If looking at these profiles, there's anyone that you think we should have gone for, would love to hear it. It is also interesting here in 2025, every team in the league, including our Oakland A's, only has $4.75 million. I can't remember whether that's just a glitch in the game and that always happens in the first year of the IAFA period or not, but assuming that in some of the coming years we'll have about $1 million more than most of the teams to spend. Given that we only have $4.75 million, I think what likely will happen here is that we're just going to end up signing one guy we really like for $4.75 million. But in the meantime, we're going to get a little bit greedy and we'll try to put out offers to a couple of different players and maybe hope that we get lucky. A guy that I really like that we're not going to make an offer to is Galterio Mancia. Looks like he could be just an absolute beast in terms of his bat. Average glove, not a ton of speed, and doesn't necessarily have personality traits that are going to improve his chances of success. If our more diversified plan falls through, it's possible we'd go after Mancia, or it's also possible that we'd go after the starting pitcher, Juan Sanabria, who looks like he could be an absolute beast if he completely develops as well. But as I said, we're going to start off and we're going to try to be a little bit greedy, admittedly. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to make offers to two different five-star players who probably don't have quite as high ceilings as the two guys that we just mentioned, but also may not have quite as much competition to get them signed. One is the shortstop Juan Rodas, 16-year-old out of the Dominican. Looks like a pretty solid glove, and he does have the potential to have 65 contacts, 65 power, while, as I said, being a pretty good glove in the middle of the infield. So he's a guy that interests us. Looking for $2.2 million. We are going to try to impress him with an offer from the start and maybe just get lucky and get him signed. So we're going to offer him $2,600,000 and hope that we just, I don't want to say blow him away, but convince him to take the bird in hand with us rather than waiting around and looking for some other offers. And we're going to do something similar with the right fielder, Elliot Bonello, guy who has potentially excellent power, really good contact, not going to necessarily draw a ton of walks, but a left-handed hitter. Love the high work ethic. Looks like a more than competent outfielder. And we're going to offer every other penny that we have to him, which is going to just be $2,150, or $2,150,000 if I could do some simple addition. So offering both of those guys a bit more than they were looking for. Again, probably getting a little bit greedy, thinking that we'll be able to get both of them. If one of them accepts and the other one doesn't, then we'll pivot to another highly regarded but perhaps more reasonably priced player. If they both bail on us and a Sanabria or a Mancia still happen to be on the market, at that point we might just offer our full $4.75 million to one of those players. And both Rodas and Bonello claim that they favor our offers and that they'll sign with us unless someone offers them a better deal, but it's very conceivable that they'll both be signed, or that they'll both be offered better deals, in which case we'll have some more decisions to make outside of the young international amateur free agents. Still waiting at this point to hear back from Mr. Santander and what he thinks about the offer we made to him. And Santander does say that our offer is the best one he has, but he's going to wait and see if he gets something better before deciding. And that did not take long. Santander is signed. The fans are pleased. Separately, Bonello, not surprisingly, says he's looking for more money than we were going to offer him. But I think that for the situation we're in, a front-loaded contract for Santander and then some relatively reasonable options is not a bad way to proceed. You look at what he's done over the course of his career, and he's definitely been an above-average offensive player, and he's gotten better over his last few years. His last 3 years are the probably the 3 best years of his entire career. Don't think he's necessarily a cornerstone that we're going to be building around when we are finally competitive. But as I said, after this year, at a 3-year, $27 million deal with 2 options, if we need to get out of the deal after this year to free up money for somebody else, or because he just hasn't performed as much as we hope. I don't think it'll be that hard to do. And I think having him on board certainly gives us a better chance to be competitive this year than before we signed him. And as we noted, Bonello says he wants more money from us. He's now looking for $4.1 million. That's not a number that we can even hit right now, since we do have the offer outstanding to the young shortstop Rodas. So we'll see what happens if Rodas accepts the offer. I really like his profile. A good hitter who's a solid infielder, is not the worst guy to bring into the organization. But if he ends up coming back and saying he wants $3.5–4 million, then we'll probably just go and make a full $4.75 million offer to one of those other players that we talked about that might have a bit higher ceiling. And we did end up getting Juan Rodas signed for $2.6 million. So I think he's a really interesting prospect to bring into our organization. Not necessarily the same bat as some of those other guys that we talked about, but still think he will be an asset in our organization and hopefully a big-time player for us in the not-so-distant future, 5, 6, 7 years, which will go by quickly in this game. So obviously we'll pivot. We're not going to be getting in the IAFA market with the $2.15 million that we have left any of the real top players, but I think there's definitely still some options out here. And with $2.15 million left, we're going to pivot to a couple of pitchers. Relief prospect Luis Parra, and he is a pure reliever, just a curveball cutter guy. Like his high work ethic, a little older. He'll be 19 soon, throws in the low 90s. His stuff and his control could both be really good. Also could have plus movement and be pretty tough on pitchers in terms of not allowing home runs. So I think he could be a pretty good bullpen arm. And then Jai Watterson, a 17-year-old out of Australia. Like the fact that he's durable, like the high work ethic and intelligence, already throwing in the low 90s, and potentially could have a 6-pitch arsenal if everything develops, with really good control and potentially above average stuff and average movement. Both of these guys looking for a little less than $1 million, so we're going to split the 2.15 that we have left, make them both offers a little more than they're looking for right now, and see if maybe we can supplement the young shortstop with a couple of young pitchers for our international complex. And we ended up signing both Jai Watterson and Luis Parra on the same day. So I think it's a pretty interesting 3-person class. We spent every penny that we have at this point as far as that was available for the international amateur free agents. But Parra, as we talked about, is a pretty high-end relief pitching prospect. Watterson could be, if everything works out, a pretty useful starter, and we like the durability. We like the high work ethic. He's probably got as good a chance of success as any 17-year-old could with that personality. And then Rodas is a pretty interesting infield prospect. You can see here the big starting pitcher, Sanabria, went for $4.75 million. Bonello, who we had made an offer to, went for $4.75 million. And then Mancia, who he's the one that I may regret a little bit. He went for $4.75 million also. But I kind of feel like taking 3 shots on goal with Parra, Watterson, and Rodas probably makes sense for a team like the Athletics, because we're going to need more than 1 or 2 great players to turn this thing around, and we're going to need a steady stream of cheap young talent that's under team control coming through this organization. Even with the boost that we've had in our budget for this year, we we're going to need to have a pretty robust development pipeline. And I think bringing in these three guys hopefully can kickstart our minor league organization over the next couple of years. And with just a few weeks to go until the start of spring training, going to check in on the development lab and some really potentially big news for the organization. Mason Miller seems to be excelling at this point with his endurance training. Would love for him to get a boost to his stamina. Might not be big enough to see given that it's a 35, but I think there's something we could see here. I never spend any time in all this editor stuff, but there should be somewhere something which tells us what his stamina, his pitching ratings. Yeah, that would be what we want to look at. So his stamina is only a 52 right now. So we'll have to remember that his stamina was a 52, and we see that right now he's excelling. So even if it stays at a 35 as far as what we see here, we'll be able to go back in and see if perhaps he made a decent amount of progress. Other than that, still generally struggling. Spence is on track to increase his pitch movement. Everybody else is frustrated, though, as we head into the home stretch of our 2024 to 2025 development lab shenanigans. And we've made it to our evaluation time, and 3 successful programs out of 8. Actually, there's only 7. There we go. There's the 8th one, Daryl Hernandez. So, yeah, 3 successful programs out of 8. Mitch Spence improved his pitch movement. Can't really see it in the rankings there, but that's good news. Eschery Ruiz improved his plate discipline. That's going to be pretty important because he's going to likely be our leadoff hitter for the foreseeable future, coming off of a season when he led the league with stolen bases, only walked 32 times, but you can see we now think his eye is above average and has the potential to get a little better. So him getting on base more hopefully will help us. And then most importantly, Mason Miller's endurance training program was outstanding. So that's going to give us some real interesting decisions to make with him as far as potentially becoming a starter or a stopper. Clear increase in his stamina, and expect him to be much less prone to an arm injury. And we actually see an increase in his stamina. A lot of times you don't see it at this level, but he did increase his stamina from a 35 to a 40. If I can remember where to go here. And he ended up getting a 12-point boost overall in terms of his 1 to 250 rating for the stamina. So I think with that 40 stamina and the 4-pitch arsenal, plus movement, decent enough control. We'll probably work on his control next year. But a guy who can start, who can throw in the triple digits is interesting. We'll see what kind of hit his stuff takes if we set him to become a starting pitcher. And it's 70 rather than 75, but still pretty electric stuff. So we're certainly going to try Mr. Miller out as a starting pitcher here in spring training when we get to the start of spring training shortly. And who knows, we may have a new ace on our staff, and if we do end up trading away Mr. Miller down the line, that could really improve his value. Also, maybe want to think about an extension. He knows his value. He's looking for $21 million a year during his peak, $88 million over 6 years. So might be a little aggressive for us to try to lock him up as a starter already, since or at this point, just because he hasn't really proven it on the field yet, and we'd like to kind of ensure that he can go kind of 5+ innings consistently, and we don't know that for sure quite yet. You can see we brought in a lot of familiar names on minor league free agent contracts at this point. And we're getting ready for the start of spring training in just a little bit of time. But 3 out of 8 programs were successful. 3 successful, 5 not successful. But the outstanding result for Mason Miller, that was probably the most important program that we had anyone working on, and very pleased that we got lucky and it paid dividends for us. And as we get close to the start of training camp, none of the top flight pitchers are still available. We've signed a few to minor league contracts of the second tier guys that happen to be out there. I think we'll make a minor league offer to Domingo Germán right now as well. May end up looking at some of these other guys, but there's no one whose high level profile that we can see right here really blows us away. The batters, there's a couple more interesting guys that are out there, but I don't think they really fit our team with the fact that we've brought on Santander and Conforto, Belt, Canna, and Gallo, as well as Kepler. 4 more guys who are kind of corner outfield first base types are the only other guys on the IL, or on the free agent market, not the IL. And they're still looking for relatively decent money. I guess conceivably if Mark Canna in particular happened to be available in a couple of weeks, maybe we would think about him, just because we could probably use a bat that's decent at getting on base against left-handed pitching, but I don't really see us doing that. I honestly think at this point, with the large surplus of money that we do have available, I'm likely to probably put another 10 or 12 million into the draft budget for this year. That'll allow us to pick a couple of players who are well over slot and probably make a run at one of those impossible to sign players who are often first or second round talent that end up falling to the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. And then we'll probably up scouting and player development a bit. Taking a look at the organization, we've improved to 18th, so we have made a little bit of progress over the last year in terms of getting this farm system straightened out. I think I might be inclined to invest a little more heavily in scouting over the next year, just to give us a little bit of a higher chance of maybe coming up with a higher potential, higher ceiling scouting find. Over the long term, I kind of think the ratio that we have between the scouting and player development budgets that we have this year, that kind of the baseline has as well, is probably the right way. But if there's ever another year to maybe skimp a little bit on player development, it could conceivably be this next year, just because the level of our farm system is still not incredibly high. And with that, we'll call it an episode. It's definitely kind of been all over the place. Ended up with Santander with that front-loaded contract. Ended up bringing in 3 international amateur free agents that we really like. So there's a lot of interesting things going on here. We got the boost in our budget, which gives us the money that we just talked about to potentially invest in the draft and scouting and player development. So we've got a lot of options for this upcoming year, and even as we get ready, the player payroll of $46 million, even with Santander, is only about $6 million more than we were running with this team a year ago. But I'm really intrigued to see what Mason Miller is going to do in spring training, and then hopefully in the regular season. I don't think we can ask for a better result from his time in the development lab than we got. And if we've just turned him into a potential very interesting 5-inning starting pitcher, I think we've definitely improved his value for us on the field over the next year or two. And then even if we do need to move on from him at some point down the line, his value is a starter who could give 150, 160 plus innings a year. Probably going to be higher than a 120 inning pitch stopper or a 70 or 80 inning pitch closer. So that one really worked out well for us. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And we'll find out whether we are lucky and or good in spring training in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.